The sound of platinum snapping is quieter than you would think, but on that Sunday morning it sounded like a gunshot. My 16-year-old niece Madison did not even look at me. She was live streaming to her followers. She had snatched the vintage bracelet right off my wrist, holding it up to the camera and calling it tarnished junk. When it did not fit over her hand, she did not unclasp it. She yanked. The delicate safety chain sheared off and 80 years of history clattered onto the patio stones. My brother Ryan sipped his mimosa. My sister-in-law Tiffany did not even look up from her ring light. Madison giggled. Oops. Garbage anyway. Nobody moved. Nobody apologized. They thought it was just jewelry. They did not know it was the only reason they still had a roof over their heads. Before we see exactly how much that joke cost her, drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from right now. I want to see who is part of our community today. I picked up the pieces of the bracelet from the cold stone. The platinum felt heavy in my palm, a dead weight where a pulse used to be. Above me the brunch continued. My sister-in-law Tiffany was busy adjusting the angle of her ring light, complaining that the shadows were ruining her aesthetic. My brother Ryan was topping off glasses, laughing at a joke he had heard 1,000 times, playing the part of the successful provider in a house he could not actually afford. This house was a stage set. The sprawling garden, the imported marble countertops, the lease on the luxury SUV in the driveway. It was all a performance of perfection, funded by credit cards they maxed out and bailouts they never acknowledged. And I was the backstage crew. I was Natalie, the plain archivist, the historian who spent her days in dust and silence. To them I was boring. I was the spinster sister-in-law who wore sensible shoes and drove a 6-year-old sedan. I was tolerated because I was useful. I stood up, sliding the broken metal into my pocket. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. A younger version of me would have cried, begging them to understand the sentimental value of what Madison had just destroyed. But the woman standing on that patio felt something else entirely. It was a cold, clinical clarity. For years I had asked myself why I stayed. Why did I pay their property taxes when they faced foreclosure? Why did I cover the cost of their emergency vacations? Why did I secretly wire $60,000 a year to the elite music conservatory so Madison could play the violin, all while they mocked my frugality? I used to call it kindness. I used to tell myself I was the glue holding the family together. But as I looked at Tiffany, who was now editing the footage of my humiliation for her story, I realized the truth. It was not kindness. It was the invisible chain of the survivor. When you grow up as the one who fixes things, you start to believe that your only value lies in your utility. You believe that love is a transaction. If you pay the bill, they will love you. If you solve the crisis, they will respect you. You wear the chain willingly because you are terrified that without it you are nothing. It is a prison you build for yourself, brick by brick, check by check. I had spent 31 years believing that if I just endured enough disrespect, eventually I would earn a seat at the table. I thought my silence was dignified. I thought my invisible support was noble. But looking at Madison, who was already bored and scrolling through her phone, I realized I had not been noble. I had been an enabler. I had taught them that I was a natural resource to be mined, not a person to be respected. They did not see a sister or an aunt standing there. They saw an appliance. And when an appliance breaks, you do not apologize to it. You kick it. Tiffany glanced at me, waving a dismissive hand. Don't look so tragic, Nat. It looked old anyway. You can probably get a few bucks for the scrap metal. I looked at her. I looked at the house my money had saved. I looked at the child my money was educating. The chain around my neck didn't snap. It simply dissolved. I am leaving, I said. My voice was quiet, barely a whisper over the music. Ryan didn't even turn around. Okay, see you next week. Don't forget Mom's birthday gift. I walked through the sliding glass doors past the kitchen island, where the unpaid bills were usually hidden in a drawer, and out the front door. I got into my car. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. The silence inside the vehicle was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was the sound of a contract expiring. The drive home was a blur of asphalt and adrenaline. I did not speed. I did not run red lights. I drove with the terrifying precision of someone who has just realized they are holding the detonator. When I walked into my apartment, the air was still and cool. It smelled of old books and lemon polish, a sharp contrast to the suffocating perfume of Tiffany's garden party. I set my keys on the counter. I made a cup of Earl Grey tea, watching the steam rise in the quiet kitchen. My hands were steady. I carried the mug to my small desk in the corner of the living room and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the stacks of archival boxes that lined the walls. This was my life, quiet, orderly, and secretly incredibly expensive. I logged into my banking portal first. Then I opened a new spreadsheet. I called it the Ledger of Ghosts. For the first time in years, I started typing out the numbers I had kept hidden in my head. The mortgage payments for Ryan's first house when he lost his job, $42,000. The loan for Tiffany's boutique that went bankrupt in 6 months, $25,000. The down payment on their current showcase home listed as a gift so they could qualify for the loan, $80,000. I stared at the numbers. They were staggering. Tiffany and Ryan walked around like royalty, posting photos of their luxury lifestyle, judging my sensible clothes and my 10-year-old car. But their kingdom was built on a foundation of my money. It was the illusion of power of the empty wallet. They believed that spending money made them powerful. They believed that consuming made them important. But real power isn't about what you spend. It is about what you control. And I controlled everything. I logged into the donor portal for the Elite Music Conservatory. My username was anonymous, just a series of numbers known only to the board of directors. I navigated to the active scholarships page. There it was, the Madison H. Artistic Merit Grant. $60,000 a year, fully funded by an anonymous benefactor, me. I had set it up 3 years ago when Madison first showed promise. I wanted her to have the best. I wanted her to have the opportunities I never had. I wanted to believe that if I gave enough, eventually they would see me. But they didn't see the donor. They just saw the free ride. They assumed the money came from the school, from the universe, from their own inherent specialness. They never once asked how a mediocre student with a bad attitude secured one of the most prestigious grants in the country. I looked at the broken bracelet sitting next to my laptop. The jeweler had told me years ago it was worth $21,000, but its value wasn't in the metal. It was in the history. It was a symbol of dignity that had survived decades only to be snapped by a teenager who thought value was measured in likes. Madison's tuition for 3 years was $180,000. The bracelet was $21,000. The math was simple. They had destroyed something precious to me because they thought I was cheap. They thought I couldn't afford nice things. They didn't realize I couldn't afford nice things because I was buying their entire lives. I moved my cursor to the Manage Funding tab. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt the cold, hard weight of a balance sheet finally zeroing out. I clicked Cancel Recurring Transfer. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to revoke this grant? This action is immediate and may affect the student's enrollment status. I clicked Yes. The screen refreshed. Status inactive. Funding withdrawn. I sat back in my chair and took a sip of tea. It was still hot. The silence in the apartment wasn't lonely anymore. It was expensive. It was the sound of $180,000 staying right where it belonged. The glitch in the matrix happened at 9 a.m. On Monday. My phone rang. It was Tiffany. I stared at her name on the screen, feeling a strange sense of detachment. She never called me on Mondays. Mondays were for her momfluencer content planning. I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Hello, Tiffany. She didn't even say hello. Nat, thank God you picked up. We have a crisis. The conservatory just called Ryan. They're saying the tuition payment for this semester bounced. I leaned back in my chair watching a speck of dust float in a sunbeam. Bounced. That's strange. It's more than strange, it's humiliating, she was shouting, now her voice shrill. They said the funding source was withdrawn. Withdrawn? Can you believe the incompetence? Madison is in the middle of rehearsals. If this isn't fixed today, they're going to pull her from the program. I took a slow sip of coffee. That sounds stressful. Stressful. It's a disaster, Tiffany huffed. Look, Ryan is useless with this stuff and I'm swamped with a brand deal. Since you work in archives and know how paperwork works, can you call them use your professional voice. Tell them it's obviously a clerical error and they need to reinstate it immediately. I almost laughed. It was classic Tiffany. Even in a crisis caused by her own arrogance, she was trying to outsource the labor to me. She didn't think for a second that the money was actually gone. To her, money was just something that existed like air. It was a resource she was entitled to. The idea that someone had deliberately taken it away was impossible. I can't call them Tiffany, I said calmly. I'm not a guardian. They won't speak to me. Just pretend, she snapped. Say you're her. I don't know her business manager. Just fix it, Natalie. We don't have time for this nonsense. I'm sure the donor has their reasons, I said. My voice was level, devoid of the panic she expected. Reasons? What reasons? Madison is a prodigy. This is just some jealous bureaucrat trying to sabotage her. Probably someone who saw her live stream yesterday and got envious of her lifestyle. The irony was so thick I could taste it. She was right. It was about the live stream, but not because of envy, because of exposure. She had exposed their cruelty to the one person who mattered. I can't help you, Tiffany, I said. You'll have to handle this one yourselves. I hung up before she could scream again. I turned my phone to silent. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with the knowledge of what was coming. They were about to hit the wall of reality, and for the first time in their lives, I wasn't going to be there to put a pillow between them and the impact. The denial phase lasted exactly 48 hours. By Wednesday, it had curdled into victimhood. Tiffany posted a video to her Instagram story. She was crying, filtering herself in black and white to look more tragic. Guys, I am literally shaking right now, she whispered into her phone. Some jealous family members are trying to sabotage Madison's future. They hacked the scholarship portal. It's so sad that people can't stand to see a young girl shine. I watched it from my desk at the museum, feeling a strange mix of amusement and disgust. She wasn't asking for help. She was weaponizing her audience. She wanted sympathy, not solutions. Then my phone buzzed. It was Madison. Aunt Nat, Mom says you won't fix the glitch. Seriously, I need a new violin bow for the showcase. And since you're being weird, you owe me. The bracelet was junk, but I looked it up and Cartier has a love bracelet that's like, okay, buy me that and we're even. I stared at the message. We're even. She had broken an heirloom, lost a scholarship, and she thought I owed her. The entitlement was breathtaking. It wasn't just a flaw. It was a worldview. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a new document on my work computer. I typed a formal header, to the Board of Directors, Elite Music Conservatory. I wasn't just an anonymous donor. In my capacity as a historian, I had spent 5 years archiving the original compositions of the conservatory's founder. I had uncovered lost symphonies, restored brittle manuscripts, and curated the exhibit that brought them international acclaim. I was a silent partner in their legacy. I wrote with precision. I detailed the terms of the Madison H. Artistic Merit Grant. I cited the clause regarding donor code of conduct, specifically the section on integrity and respect for historical preservation. I attached a photo of the broken bracelet next to the founder's original handwritten letter, gifting it to my grandmother. This student, I wrote, has demonstrated a flagrant disregard for the very history this institution is built to protect. By destroying a piece of the founder's personal legacy for social media clout, she has violated the spirit of this grant. Therefore, I am exercising my right to permanently revoke funding. This decision is final and irreversible. I hit send. 10 minutes later, I received a reply from the chairman of the board. Dear Miss Natalie, we are horrified. We had no idea of the connection. The revocation is processed immediately. We will also be reviewing her enrollment status pending a conduct hearing. Thank you for your continued dedication to our history. I closed my laptop. The shift was complete. I wasn't just the aunt anymore. I wasn't the doormat. I was the archivist. I had curated their rise, and now I had curated their fall. The silence on my phone was no longer waiting. It was loading. The jewelry shop wasn't in a strip mall. It was tucked away in the historic district, behind a heavy door that buzzed when you pressed the intercom. The air inside smelled of metal polish and quiet concentration. Mr. Abernathy, a man who had spent 60 years staring into the hearts of diamonds, adjusted his loupe as I laid the broken pieces of the bracelet onto the velvet pad. Platinum, he muttered, his voice raspy. Mid-century Art Deco. Exceptional craftsmanship. You don't see latches like this anymore. They were designed to hold forever. He picked up the snapped safety chain with tweezers, turning it under the harsh light. This wasn't wear and tear, he said, looking up at me over his spectacles. This was violence. Someone pulled this with significant force. I know, I said. He didn't answer immediately. He picked up the main band, the one Madison had called tarnished junk, and tilted it. He paused. He squinted. Then he let out a sharp intake of breath, a sound so loud in the quiet room that I flinched. Miss Natalie, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Do you know the provenance of this piece? It was my grandmother's, I said. She left it to me. She said it was special, but she never said why. Mr. Abernathy beckoned me closer. I peered through the magnifier. On the inside of the band, etched in script, so microscopic, it looked like a scratch to the naked eye, was an inscription. To Eleanor. For the music that saved me. H. V. 1948. My blood ran cold. H. V. Heinrich von Statten, the founder of the elite music conservatory. The man whose statue stood in the courtyard where Madison dreamed of playing. The man whose original scores I had spent the last 5 years restoring in the archives. Your grandmother, Mr. Abernathy said softly, was Eleanor Vance. She wasn't just a patron, he said, his eyes wide with reverence. She was his first cellist. When the war ended, she helped him smuggle his compositions out of Europe. He had this commissioned for her. It's not just jewelry, Miss Natalie. This is a relic. It belongs in a museum. I stared at the broken metal. The irony was suffocating. Madison, in her quest for viral fame and shallow validation, hadn't just broken a bracelet. She had desecrated a piece of history directly linked to the very institution she was desperate to join. She claimed to live for music, yet she had literally snapped the legacy of the man who built her world, all because it wasn't shiny enough for TikTok. Can you repair it? I asked, my voice steady though my mind was racing. I can, Mr. Abernathy said solemnly. I can fuse the platinum, but the scar will remain. Metal has a memory. Good, I said. Leave the scar. I walked out of the shop into the blinding afternoon sun. I felt heavier but also sharper. Before this moment, my decision to pull the funding had felt like justice. Now it felt like duty. Madison didn't just lack gratitude, she lacked the fundamental reverence required to be an artist. She was a vandal in the temple of music. I took out my phone. There were 12 missed calls from Ryan. A text from Tiffany popped up. We need to talk. Now. I didn't reply. I didn't need to talk. I had the truth in my pocket, and it was heavier than platinum. The twist wasn't that I had the money. The twist was that I held the history, and history, I knew better than anyone, has a way of burying those who don't respect it. The phone buzzed again. We're coming over. I smiled. Let them come. I was ready. The ambush happened at 6 p.m. on Thursday. I was sitting in my living room reading a book on music theory, enjoying the quiet hum of my paid-off apartment. Then a pounding on the door shattered the peace. I looked through the peephole. It was Ryan, Tiffany, and Madison. They looked frantic. Ryan was pacing. Tiffany's makeup was smudged. Madison looked sullen, her arms crossed, clearly dragged there against her will. I opened the door. I didn't invite them in. I stood in the doorway, blocking their path. Can I help you? Help us! Ryan exploded, pushing past me into the living room. Natalie, are you insane? We just got a letter from the conservatory. They're giving us 48 hours to pay $60,000 or Madison is expelled. Tiffany was right behind him, her voice trembling. They said the donor withdrew funding due to ethical violations. Ethical violations, can you believe the nerve? We need that money, Nat. You have to loan it to us. Just until Ryan's next commission comes in. Madison slumped onto my sofa without asking, kicking her shoes off onto my clean rug. It's so unfair, she muttered. I didn't even do anything. I watched them. The panic. The entitlement. The complete lack of self-awareness. They still thought this was a negotiation. They still thought I was the safety net. I can't loan you the money, I said quietly. Of course you can, Ryan shouted. You have savings. You live like a nun. We're family, Natalie. You can't let Madison's future be destroyed because of some clerical error. It wasn't a clerical error, I said. I walked over to my desk. I picked up a single sheet of paper, the printed confirmation of the withdrawal. I held it out to Ryan. What is this? He snapped, snatching it from my hand. Read the signature line, I said. He scanned the document. His eyes stopped at the bottom. His face went pale. He looked up at me, then back at the paper. Donor signature Natalie Vance. You, Tiffany whispered. You were the donor. For 3 years, I said. $180,000. Paid quarterly. Anonymous. But why? Ryan stammered. Why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted Madison to succeed on her own merit, I said. And because I knew if you knew the money came from me, you wouldn't respect it. You'd treat it like everything else I give you, expected disposable owed. Tiffany sank onto the arm of the sofa. But you canceled it. Because of the bracelet. Not just the bracelet, I said. Because of the disrespect. Because of the entitlement. Because you stood there and watched your daughter destroy something precious to me for internet clout and you didn't even tell her to apologize. Madison looked up, her eyes narrowing. It was just an old bracelet, Aunt Nat. God, get over it. It wasn't just a bracelet, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. It was a gift from Heinrich von Statten. The name hung in the air. Even Madison, with her limited attention span, knew that name. It was etched in gold above the entrance to her school. He gave it to my grandmother in 1948, I continued. He called her the woman who saved his music. When you broke that safety chain, Madison, you didn't just break jewelry. You snapped a direct link to the founder of the very institution you're begging to attend. You desecrated his legacy. Ryan looked like he was going to be sick. Tiffany covered her mouth with her hand. Madison's mouth fell open, the sullen defiance finally cracking. You knew, Madison whispered. I'm a historian, I said. It's my job to know, and it was my job to protect that legacy from people who don't understand its value. The silence in the room was absolute. The power dynamic had shifted so violently I could almost feel the air pressure change. They weren't the successful family demanding help from the poor aunt anymore. They were vandals standing in the home of their patron, and the bill had finally come due. Tiffany was the first to break. She burst into tears, but they weren't the pretty filtered tears she staged for Instagram. They were ugly, desperate sobs. She grabbed my hand, her nails digging into my skin. Please, Nat. You can't do this. It is Madison's dream. She is just a child. You can't punish a child for being silly. I pulled my hand away. Silly. Breaking a stranger's property is silly. Desecrating a historical artifact because it doesn't match your outfit is character rot. Ryan stepped forward, looking haggard. Natalie, please. We will pay you back. I swear. Just reinstate the scholarship. If she gets kicked out now, she will never get into Juilliard. Her life will be over. Her life won't be over, I said. It will just be different. It will be earned. I looked at Madison. She wasn't crying. She was staring at the floor, her face burning with a mix of shame and fury. I am not destroying her future, Ryan, I said, my voice soft but unyielding. I am saving it. They looked at me confused. If I bail her out now, I continued, if I let her believe that she can smash history and treat people like garbage without consequence, she will grow up to be a monster. She will have talent, yes, but talent without character is worthless. It is a house built on sand. I walked to the door and held it open. The cool evening air rushed in, clearing the stifling atmosphere of entitlement. I am planting a seed, I told them. It is a hard seed and it is going to be bitter to swallow. But maybe 10 years from now, when Madison holds something precious in her hands, she will remember the sound of that platinum snapping, and she will treat it with respect. That is the only scholarship I have left to give. They left in silence. No one slammed the door this time. They walked out into the hallway like ghosts carrying the weight of a reality they could no longer deny. 3 weeks later, I picked up the bracelet from Mr. Abernathy. The repair was masterful, but the scar was there, a thin silver vein running through the platinum where the safety chain had been fused back together. I slipped it onto my wrist. It felt different now, heavier, realer. It wasn't just a grandmother's gift anymore. It was a battle scar. Madison was withdrawn from the conservatory. Ryan and Tiffany couldn't come up with the $60,000. She is attending the local public high school now. I heard from a mutual friend that she sold her expensive violin bow to pay for repairs on her own phone screen when she dropped it. It's a start. I sat in my living room as the sun went down, the golden light hitting the stacks of archival boxes. My phone was silent. The bank account was full. The invisible chain was gone. I wasn't the aunt who paid for everything anymore. I was just Natalie, and for the first time in my life, the silence wasn't waiting for permission. It was peace. If you have ever had to cut off a hand that was hurting you just to save your own peace, share this story. You never know who needs permission to finally say enough.